Hey guys, welcome back to Medical Coding with Blue. So, this is another episode of Day in the Life of a Medical Coder. Somebody asked, what is my typical day look like? What kind of production standards do I have? What are some of the things that I do on a daily basis? So I'm just going to talk about a couple of the days I had last week, just sort of give y'all a good idea of what I do, because I think last week was a really good mix of everything that I typically do on a daily basis anyway. So depending on where you work and what kind of clinic you're in, production standards are going to be different. For me, production standards used to be at 15 per hour, 15 encounters because I'm in the outpatient setting. They recently lowered it not too long ago to 12 per hour because we are in a specialty clinic. I have all specialty clinics. I have orthopedics, podiatry, rheumatology, neurology, and pulmonology. Okay, not to mention I help out with other clinics as well, like pain and physical medicine, things like that. So all of these are considered specialty clinics. So the production standards a little bit lower because of the complexity of the clinic. Not everybody's in a complex clinic. Some people are in very straightforward, very easy clinics because they have a higher volume and things like that. It just depends on wherever your supervisor's putting you at. I am one of the ones who has some of the most experience in the hospital, and especially when it comes to a variety of settings. I am one of the very few that has touched almost everything in the hospital. So I get to me, they're more interesting when it's very fun and complex work. That's what I thrive on. So I typically start my day running reports. What I will do is I will go into the system that houses all of the encounters, and I will run the report from the day before for all of my clinics, all of my providers, because I don't have full control over the orthopedics clinic. It's broken down by a couple of other coders as well. But what I do is I run my providers and I run everybody else. All the other clinics is full, so I run them all to see how many encounters I had, if there's any issues with those encounters as far as like something's not showing up, or maybe the encounters were not closed. Then I can have a good idea of what typically comes in for the day, and I'll print them off and I'll total them out and find out how many I have, and then I'll put that number on a workload. Okay, so that's what I start my day with, that total number, and whatever that total number may be. Some days I receive 150 encounters. Some days I receive almost 200 encounters. Some days I receive 85 encounters. So it just depends on how busy the clinics are. And then what I will do is I will start where we enter in when we use the encoder. I will look at reports there to see if there's anything pressing that I have to take care of, as far as like if there's billable encounters, or if there's lots of encounters on some error reports. We have certain reports that get pulled for like common errors, and so far my provider's doing really well. I don't have to deal with them too much on those, which thankfully that's a good thing because it is a lot. And then I will so once that's done, I will go and I will start settling in for the day, and I'll start working. What I do is pick one provider that I really want to work on that day, because I have so many providers, and this is how I delegate my time. I delegate my time by looking to see who needs me, basically who is most pressing first. And if I don't have anybody that's pressing that day, I will start out with somebody that I know is going to be, very good, especially first thing in the morning, because me, like a lot of other people out there, I have to have my coffee first thing in the morning. If I'm like not very first thing, but it's got to be at least by 8 o'clock. I gotta have my coffee because and it gives me time to wake up, before I start having my coffee, which is good, because I don't think I could just like wake up and just start drinking coffee, because that's too much for me. But at least if I'm mentally awake, I can at least enjoy my coffee. So I will start, working on these encounters, and just sort of making the day start that way. Then mid morning, I usually have people stopping by my office for questions and things like that. I do help out some of the other coders as far as like if they have questions. Um, Sometimes it just depends on who's coming by. The reason that they're coming by. Sometimes it's just that they have a random question, and sometimes it's because they're trying to understand something in their clinic. And because I've had a lot of experience with injuries, I'm pretty much the one that people go to for injury questions. And that's fine for me because I could talk about injuries all day long. And so I'll do that. I've also had to stop and do like training. We have training that we have to stay on top of in order to maintain our computer access and things like that. Sometimes it's HIPAA, sometimes it's just safety things, it just depends. There's a whole like a website that we can go to for that information. So if I need to take a break, I will check that website and see if there's anything that I need to do there as far as being able to maintain my access. I had to work on last week, I had to work on my evaluation, my self-evaluation. So we have an evaluation like yearly, like everybody else does. But for ours, we have a midpoint, and it's a self-evaluation. So basically they give us all of our bullets, like your accuracy and your production is one bullet, like your communication is another bullet, education is another bullet, things like that. So you have to rate yourself, and you have to say like, what did you do during the rating period for this, for this bullet or that bullet and that bullet. A lot of people don't like to mess with theirs. I will max mine out. It's 2,000 characters that you can type out for each bullet, and I do make sure that I max out those characters, because I do a lot, and I keep track of it during the rating period by keeping it on my Outlook calendar. I use Outlook at work, and I will, like, if I'm given a class that day, I will put in there that I gave a class. All of my coding tip of the week, I have been pretty consistent with coding tip of the week. There was like a couple of weeks before I left to Chicago that I did not send a coding tip of the week, only because there was a lot of providers that were out at that time, and I don't like to flood their inbox when they're not there, because I'm sure they get tons of email as it is. But there was a lot of hubbub going on, so I wanted to make sure that I did not burn them out. So I did give them a break for a couple of weeks, and then I resumed sending coding tip of the week. But from the beginning of the rating period till last week, I had sent out 30 coding tip of the week, and I made sure that I wrote that on there. I wrote down all of the tips, what the title was of those tips, and I put on there that this was not just for the providers, but it was for the ancillary staff, like the techs and the nurses as well. So those are things that you got to make sure that you write down and make sure that you keep track of, because that's your time. That's the time that you're investing in your providers. And that's what I wanted her to understand as well. And my supervisor, when I wrote all this stuff down. And one of the other bullets was, making sure that you're using your coding references before asking a question to the supervisor. And she's like, make sure, you use the coding clinics, make sure you've used the ICD-10 book and the CPT book, and any other coding guidances we've gotten. And I said, okay. So I wrote on there, anytime I've had a audit, I've always used, and I named each one of them in my rebuttals, I said, I've also used the following reputable websites, and I named all of these websites. If you've watched the video for helpful coding websites for coders, I listed all of those ones that I mentioned there in my evaluation form as well, that I do reference those websites. I put on there that I subscribe to the New England Journal of Medicine. That is something new for this rating period. I only started subscribing to them like in August, I think. June or July or August. One of the two. I started subscribing then, and I get weekly journals. So, I read them. The other day, I got to see an ankle fracture and dislocation repair. They had a video on the website, so I thought that was pretty neat. So, I coded all day, doesn't mean I've ever seen it, so it was really neat to see that. And I told her that I read the articles, and I've used some of those articles as inspiration for some of the coding tips, and that I, of course, get the journal from AHIMA, the American Health Information Management Association. And I told her that I keep tabs on, the latest in legal changes and things that are coming up, and I made sure that I put all of that on there because all of that information is important. She has to understand that this is what I do, and I take it very seriously. I take my job very seriously, and I take education very seriously. And I did put on there that I've helped my fellow coders because I think it's important that we share knowledge. And that's not something that is always done. That is not something that a lot of people do because sometimes people just don't want to share information, but I am a sharer, I have no problem sharing. And I did cite the one instance where the ER coder had come into my class that I was having for the PAs, and that she was asking questions, and I provided her with links to the AHA clinics that I had used. So the coding clinics, so it was a good way of doing like outreach education for other coders, as well. And so, that was my evaluation that I had wrote, and it took me all day to do that. So, but in between time, I was still sort of, I had to stop and look and do some more encounters, and then stop and work on that. And then I submitted it. And like I said, I do also the continuing education as far as like being able to keep my computer access and stuff. So, those are some of the things that I do in my day. That's pretty much how my day goes. It's either talking with my providers or, working on encounters or preparing for my next class. I am not doing any more classes right now. I had my last class with the PA students last week, so I am good for right now. But I am still working on my deep dive audit with Dr. X. He's up next. I was going to do another provider as well, but he's been in a mood lately. So I'm just going to, sometimes you just have to sort of let him, and it has nothing to do with me. He's just been in a mood. So when they're in a mood like that, they're not going to be as receptive as I need them to be. So it's sort of a wasted time, if you will. So I'm just going to put him on the back burner for right now. But I have my eye on another provider I think I want to work on as well, because he's doing very well, but he has some areas where he can improve, So with Dr. X, I have like 2 more encounters that I need to pull for him. When I'm doing this deep dive, and we have a deep dive that we have to do with providers, and essentially what we're doing is we're pulling 5 records for each provider. Originally it was supposed to be 3. They lowered it to 1, and they said, okay, all you have to do is 1. Now I've already done my 1 required one that I have to do, but this change was made before, when I had already told Dr. X I was going to do one with him. So he's already expecting me to do one with him. And so I told my supervisor, I was like, can I still do it? And she's like, yeah, you can still do it. This would mean that you're exceeding that bullet. So I was like, okay. I'm all about that, So I have, like I said, I have like a couple more records that I want to get for him because I want it to be something that's worth his while, that he's gonna benefit from. I don't want to just show him very simple mistakes, or something that's not going to give him a lot of improvement direction. I mean, he does really well as it is. So there's not really a whole lot he needs to improve on, but he did say that he was okay with getting it because he said, if, I could learn from anything. And so the 3 that I already have for him is very thoughtfully picked out. So I think it's going to be a good thing when I do finally sit down with him and do this meeting, this one-on-one. So that will be my next one-on-one, and that's about it. So, but yes, a lot of my day is spent doing either queries too as well. Sometimes I will have to write out a query and ask what's going on with this encounter, what happened here with this documentation, that kind of thing. So it just seems hectic and a lot. But every coder is different. Some coders are not as hands-on as I am. They have a more reserved approach, and some don't like to speak to providers because they get very nervous. I used to be like that. And then I was able to break out of my shell a little bit once I started communicating, so that it just takes time, and then of course, when you are more confident with with your skill set, right? It does make you a little bit more, comfortable with approaching providers, because I always make sure that I have looked forward and backward before I ask them any questions, because I don't want them to feel like I'm ever wasting their time. That's how I've always felt. I want to make sure that they know that when I'm coming to them, it's because there's a reason. And I'm not just coming with them with any old willy-nilly question, Sometimes when they explain, they're like, oh, okay, well, I can get why you don't understand because of this, and then they'll explain it. But this is very important when you are working with providers directly, that you make sure that that they know that you are not wasting their time, that you take their time very seriously, and that you're respectful of what they're saying. And sometimes even if you have to write notes, you can do that as well. Because I've seen people ask the same question and literally upset the provider. You should have wrote it down, or you should have asked more questions while you were there, because it's like I said, it's very important that you make sure that the provider understands that you are respectful of their time. Okay. And I always try to be very well dressed whenever I'm at work. You will never catch me in jeans. Now, I used to wear jeans way back in the day when I wasn't in the hospital and we were in a like an ancillary building. And I didn't have any exposure to providers, and I was brand new back then. I didn't know any better, but then I started upping my game and I started to dress up. And, I think that's very important. How you present yourself is very important. This is people's first impressions of you. You never, ever, 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 ever want to give people a reason not to respect you, as far as like, hey, I'm just going to go in willy-nilly with jeans and wild hair colors and things like that. Now, I've seen people with really nice hair colors that are dyed, but when you start going off on colors that are not natural hair color, it gets a little dicey. You are in a professional work environment, and some people may not like that. I mean, they may not like that I say that, but I'm just telling you the truth. These are things that need to be thought of, because I see some people and I'm like, and some coders are like, well, they don't listen to anything that I say. And then I'm looking at them and they're dressed like they're going to go to a concert. Okay, well, let me take a crack at them. Well, guess who they listened? Well, why did they listen to you? Well, let's think about this for a second, okay? When you are approaching another professional, you need to be professional. You need to be prepared. You need to have shown that you were doing your homework. And if you don't, that's the response you're going to get, because they don't have time for you to be wasting their time, and to understand that right out of the gate is very important. So like I said, it's first impressions are key. And some people have a hard time with how to dress. They don't know how to dress. That was one of the topics that they had at conference this year was professional dress. And the folks from Macy's were out there. And I was like, whoa, this is really awesome, And they were talking about, just maybe investing in one or two really nice pieces and then sort of building from there, like a nice pair of slacks. And then you can, get a couple of blouses and just sort of build from there. It doesn't take a lot, especially with coupons and everybody's sort of competing, all these big box stores and these department stores are all competing for attention. So it is possible to get nice clothes for not a lot of money. There's always those alternatives, but it is all about being the entire package, with being a medical coder. And when I say the entire package, it's, being able to communicate, being able to research and study on your own independently. Mostly just the ability to communicate very well, that it plays a big part of it. And being diligent and working hard. Those are all the things that are key to being a medical coder. So just thoughts from me to you. But yes, this is typically what my day looks like. So yes. And then at the end of the day, I total out how many encounters I did, and then I put them on the workload report. I deduct any time that I've taken as far as like education with other providers, or if I've gone to a class that day, because we have monthly coder meetings and you have to take out time for that. So if there's something like that, if I've had a meeting with my supervisor, I can also put that on my workload report as well, and just sort of make notes. And I take a lot of detailed notes, and sometimes my notes are scattered all over the place because I had done a class during this rating period, and I forgot about it completely. It wasn't even on my calendar, and that was how bad I had forgotten about it. But I was going through my cabinet, and I saw the sign-in roster from this one class that I forgot, and I said, well, gotta add this one, So I was able to add it, and it's just one more thing for my supervisor to look at, So I did tell her that how long, did I have to do this my evaluation. She said, you have 3 days. So I said, okay. I said, it's gonna be a lot. I said, just so you know. She goes, okay, Blue. Well, what are you going to do? Anyway, I have got to get going because I'm already going to be late. But I will see y'all on the next video. Bye!